Hi, my name is Ida.
And my name is Deja. And welcome to Sad Girl Sunday.
Welcome to episode 4 of Sad Girl Sunday. This episode, we'll be talking about monogamy, polygamy, and everything in between. And so, before we get into it, we're going to take a minute just to check in. How you doing, Deja? How was your week?
I am good. My week, I think, honestly, I always say this every week. I always very much look forward to the weekends. I think my week was just jam-packed with so many things to do, not only including work, but things I had to get done outside of work. And so, yeah, I only got like a very small portion of things on my to-do list done, which I feel like is a completely realistic, feeling that a lot of people have. But yeah, my week, it's a weekend, so I'm happy it's weekend, but I also feel like 5-day work week, 2-day weekend doesn't sit right in my soul. So
Dude, I know. When we figure out how to monetize the podcast, it'll be better.
Yes. But
Yeah.
how was your week?
My week was good. What did I do this week? Let me look at my calendar. I don't know what the fuck I did this week. Let me see. I had class 2 days of the week, Monday and Tuesday. I was not in the mood for school. I have been kind of avoiding schoolwork a little bit, but it'll be fine. I'll get back into it. I think I just really enjoyed Saturday because I got to see Cynthia for her birthday.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
Yeah, it was a really good time. And then, got to see like Derek, and Cynthia also says she really loves listening to the show because it makes her miss school. And she was like, yeah, that first episode when you guys gave me a shout out, I wanted to cry. And I was like, you're a good girl. So it was just nice. It was nice to kind of like be around like old friends again. And
Yeah,
I'm enjoying that part of like kind of being home, just catching up with people. So it's been a good little week.
I was just about to say that. I was like, last week it was Tyler, this week Cynthia and Eric.
I know.
Like, just like going down the list, getting to see all of these amazing people. So I'm very jealous.
Aw, but I mean, yeah, hopefully luckily, like everyone else, they've been vaccinated because they have work. And I know April 13th is when like it'll be open to the public, I think. So I'm gonna like look to see if I can get vaccinated towards end of April, beginning of May, or probably beginning of May once I finish the semester. It's like I can think about that after I finish school stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, super necessary. I mean, honestly, as long as they're allowing more people to get it, I would just urge people to get it. So
I know. It's like, so many feelings surrounding getting vaccinated, but it's also kind of like, just put it in my arm and let me go to the mall. I just want to go outside again and not feel guilty for being outside.
no, I get that. I feel like a lot of people are just, we've been at this pandemic for over a year now. And so we're all just like, at this point, just sick of it. And obviously people aren't even really listening to the restrictions that they have put in place. Like, I don't know if you've heard about all of those parties that are happening over spring break in Miami and
This
nobody
year,
wearing masks. Yeah.
they're still, I mean, people are going to do whatever they want.
Exactly.
But it's also kind of like, man, I don't blame people. People are fed up.
Yeah.
They're tired. It's a long wait.
Part of me is like, I get it. But I also, another part of me is like, but I'm following the rules.
I know.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going out in massive crowds, not wearing masks. So part of me is like, I get it. I'm fed up. I'm frustrated too. But then I'm also on the same hand, like, but that doesn't mean that we can act the fool. Like, this is very much still killing people.
Right.
So if not, like, if nothing else and you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for like your elders, your grandparents, your parents, the people in your family who are immunocompromised,
Yeah, and a lot of the only reason why I'm like hesitant to like judge anyone who's going out and stuff, it's because like at this point a lot of like elderly folk have been eligible to get vaccinated. A lot of like working people have been eligible to get vaccinated.
Mm.
And so like young people who are unemployed like kind of like sitting ducks, and the prioritization of the vulnerable populations like the young and the elderly, like very young, like children and the elderly, obviously makes sense. But you know, people feel kind of like cooped up for a year. I can definitely like say like when we were first in lockdown and people were still going on spring break and doing whatever the fuck they want, I was hella like, what the fuck? Why are these people like just not giving a fuck? Like we were only a month in, and now it's like I'm kind of like, you know what? If you get it, most likely you have a grandparent that's vaccinated, or they at least qualify to get vaccinated. And hopefully, like, I don't know, I'm trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, assuming that they will probably not be around their elderlies for like at least 2 to 3 weeks after they go on their spring break vacation in an ideal world.
Yeah, I'm like,
So,
I don't know if they're thinking that far ahead. Like, okay, I'm gonna go to Florida on the 24th, and then I'm not gonna see grandma and grandpa until May 7th.
right.
So,
We'll
but
see.
I don't know. I mean, part of me is, like you said, I totally understand the sentiment of just being cooped up for such a prolonged period of time. And it would drive anyone to the point of being like, honestly, at this point, screw it. I'm going to do what I want. But I also, and I think maybe it's just because I work in healthcare with immunocompromised patients that it just makes it very hard to justify sometimes individuals' actions when there's no real thought about the people who can't get vaccinated. Because I think there's like not a lot of conversation going on about people who can't get vaccinated. Like they're eligible, you know, they're in the age group or in the age range that's eligible to get vaccinated. They just can't for other reasons, whether that means around like cancer treatment or you know what I mean? So it's like I really do sympathize with those populations because I'm sure they would love to get it. They just obviously can't. So.
Right. Or they could like be in like isolated parts of the country where it's hard to get access to,
or just access, you know, like think about all of the Black and brown individuals that COVID has obviously impacted and affected and killed. And I highly doubt they're being prioritized. You know what I mean? Like the populations that really do need it the most, the vulnerable populations, not just the old and the young, like vulnerable in terms of lack of infrastructure populations who definitely need it are probably not getting it. So as much as y'all want to enjoy your spring break, the people who are going to suffer from that is not y'all.
Right. Man, I wonder if I want to know, like, honestly, I have not looked up the number of cases. I don't know if it's been increasing or decreasing at this point at all. Like, I think after the winter spike, my ass was just like, I'm checking out mentally. Because it just felt like every day was doomsday.
Yeah.
I don't know. COVID cases in Los Angeles. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's horrible. Oh, it's like, yeah, it went down by a lot.
It's probably just due to people getting vaccinated too, which is really good. Which goes back to the sentiment. If you can get vaccinated,
yeah,
making a difference.
It was the holiday season that was like horrible.
Well, yeah, because people are meeting up with extended family members. Obviously, you know, people aren't going to feel like they want to wear a mask when they're inside with their like uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters.
Right. So. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Well, we survived, and here we are, like at the tail end of this pandemic.
Hopefully tail end. Fingers
right.
crossed. Jeez. Anyway,
yeah. I digress. Moving in or moving forward to the news and updates section. We don't have a bunch of news and updates that we want to kind of like bring in. we're gonna actually like bring in a point of reference connected to our topic of monogamy and polygamy and all those kind of like different relationships people might want to explore or learn more about. And our reference point was the Derek Jackson scandal. Derek Jackson is a famous relationship coach slash guru on YouTube, and he was exposed for cheating on his wife like a week ago. He came out with a video like with his wife saying it was something that they already dealt with in their marriage, and it kind of like brought to surface the hypocrisy that can exist amongst like influencers or people who just are in Hollywood or on screen. We don't really know how they engage outside of the way that they're presenting themselves. And this man in particular became famous for preaching against cheating and infidelity and other stuff, but behind closed doors, he was going against his own words and going against his own teachings. It just kind of makes me personally, like, I like made like a whole thread on Instagram, and I kind of just like started thinking about how a lot of people perform monogamy because it is put on a pedestal as a standard or goal for people to kind of achieve in their lifetime. And throughout societies around the globe, I don't know why, but like we really do press finding a partner, building a family, and this, I don't know, we romanticize the image of having one person in your life. As we get deeper into the topic, we will talk more about how it's a failing system. It's a standard that's not easily attainable or achievable for many people. And it was also uncomfortable to watch the video with Derek Jackson because his wife just looked like she was being held hostage the entire time. It looked like he forced her to sit in the video and to say that she was fine with everything, to say that he and her had already gotten over this. It seems as though that she isn't fully thinking for herself, but I don't know shit because I'm only looking at it from, my end of the computer screen. We don't really know. Maybe they're finding a way to kind of monetize the situation in their interest. But I digress. We just wanted to kind of use this incident to kind of expand into the topic of monogamy and relationships.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the video, because I saw a part of it on Instagram, he was kind of saying, I explain all of this in my book. So maybe they're really trying to turn lemons into lemonade and be like, look, I recognize this happened. I know this is coming out. So might as well try to make a profit off of this news and information. But I think in watching the video, it was just very, I don't know, I feel like I felt like secondhand embarrassment almost because it felt like you said, sometimes in the conversation, it seemed like the wife just felt kind of like she was like dissociating from what was being said. And I completely understand that, wanting, sitting beside someone and having them say all of this stuff and air all their dirty laundry. And I think it's honestly great that she is able and strong enough to stand beside him and work together. And I hope he is doing the work, because he was like, we are getting past this, and I was like, no, sir, this is you. You need to do the work. You need to be going to therapy. You need to be praying and thanking your lucky stars that this woman is still choosing to stay with you and support you and provide a foundation and a home for you and your children. This is you. Like, this is not a we situation. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, you both need to work together in order to make it work, but you have a lot of catching up to do.
Right.
So it was just, and I think, like you said, it's a perfect segue into the conversation of like monogamy, polygamy, and all of these other relationship structures that unfortunately aren't really talked about or normalized. So they kind of get stigmatized, So before we even get into all of that, I think it's important just to define monogamy and what that is and why it is the quote unquote normalized relationship structure in a vast majority of the world. And so there are, I guess, three kind of definitions of monogamy. The first one is just the practice or state of being married to one person at a time. It's also the practice or state of having a sexual relationship with only one partner, or the habit of having only one mate at a time. So essentially, it's just you and another partner and staying committed, quote, faithful, quote, whatever, to that one person.
Right. And generally, humans suck at doing that. We are terrible at monogamy. There's just so much research on the rate of divorce especially in the United States. And I mean, it's the reason why Jerry Springer was able to become rich off of other people's failure to achieve a monogamous relationship. Generally, I think people fail because we believe monogamy and love are synonymous, but love is a feeling and monogamy is a rule or law or structure that we place upon people.
Exactly. I mean, it's important to also discuss like that idea of monogamy and love not necessarily being the same thing, because if you think about it, monogamy is a structure of how you choose to go about your relationship, whereas love, I feel like, doesn't necessarily have a structure. And so you're kind of, I think people have gotten confused in equating the two, like monogamy means love, love means monogamy, and that's not necessarily the case. And when you think those things, that's how you set yourself up for failure. So it's like, why would humans even make this rule or concept? And there's this narrative that men, want to be free sexually, and women want to be exclusive and choose a provider because they are vulnerable, which is the most trash trope in the world. But basically, essentially women trade sexual fidelity to men in exchange for goods and services. And this honestly can be taken back decades and decades and decades ago, when that was the social structure. That was like, you provide, I'll provide this in exchange. But honestly, why do men even care if women are sexually exclusive? And I think that also goes back to just women being the individuals who give birth. When we give birth, there's really no doubt that the baby belongs to us genetically, but the male often has to take the woman's word for it. So
yeah, like before we had DNA tests and things to determine for sure if you are the father. I mean, like the way people would know is just, the baby's born and it came out of you, so you're the mom for sure. But men, because of the fact that there's no physical, I guess direct connection to the birth of the child, they're far more inclined to seek multiple sex partners. And it's a very understandable revolutionary payoff for men who kind of want to spread their seed, because 12,000 years ago, when humans stopped being hunter gatherers and they figured out, how to finally, like, in some ways, like, monetize harvesting food through farming and things like that. That is kind of when monogamy became more relevant. During the hunter-gatherer era, or when we were just kind of like out here just surviving in our little, like, I don't know, caves and whatever people did back before we had farming. They didn't have like marriage contracts or rings, or there wasn't a formality around monogamy. It was just kind of the baby is born, the tribe, village, or the people around it all kind of like help raise the children in some way or form. But marriage, after farming and the structure of agriculture built into our society became a thing, marriage became the main way you increased your family labor. And if you had a bigger family, you had a bigger labor force, especially if you were a farmer. And it's also beneficial if you married to expand your network through in-laws. Traditionally, people would kind of marry one another for empire building, or, just in general, like, building business today. That's people marrying other rich people marrying into other big, like, families who have like money and whatever. And so, like, the one of the oldest and most famous examples of this is Alexander the Great and Cleopatra falling in love. And it's kind of like those people didn't even come from the same culture. Like, for two people to come from such, vastly different parts of the world and fall in love is kind of a veil that's really covering the fact that there are two powerful entities and people who are leaders of nations trying to find ways to combine their empires and build wealth. And there was an attempt to do that through marriage when Cleopatra was the the ruler of Egypt, and Alexander the Great was ruler of Rome. Generally speaking, monogamy is not necessarily a natural thing, it is a rule. But if it's what you choose, which is fine, you have to work for it. And I think, like, if we assume it's something that just kind of happens, or it's normal, or it's for everybody, we are setting ourselves up to fail in a sense.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, there's not enough, just piggybacking off of what you said, there's not enough conversation on the alternative, non-monogamous relationships and how they too can be successful. And so we got our information from Narelle Moravsky, and there was an amazing TED Talk video just kind of talking about the ways we think about consensual non-monogamy and kind of changing our perceptions onto what that even means. And so in this talk, Narelle really highlights a number of convincing reasons why polyamory should be a more widely considered option. This includes its emphasis on transparent communication, diffusion of economic and other responsibilities and resources, and the importance of autonomy in relationships. So essentially, from this, Narelle will argue or argues that we need to change our definition of quote unquote relationships to include polyamory and the vast amount of other forms of consensual non-monogamy.
Right. And so the alternative options to monogamy that Deja's referencing regarding consensual non-monogamy, it refers to a romantic relationship in which all partners agree to engage in sexual, romantic, and or emotional relationships with others, but this is not cheating. So cheating involves deceit, lying, and dishonesty, and consensual non-monogamy relies on agreements made by consenting adults. Consenting adults, that is the emphasis. So some ways to visually, let me draw a picture, even though we can't show you guys anything. Try to imagine monogamy specific to sex and romance limits one individual to only one other individual. But in our family and in our friendship circles, we can have plenty of family members that we love and engage with. And in our friendships, we can have more than one friend that we can have fulfilling platonic relationships with. But consensual non-monogamy takes that same concept that we already apply to our family and friend circles, and we are able to kind of move fluidly between sex, romance, and friendship and grow that circle in consent with consensual non-monogamy. So you basically have the ability to customize and design your relationship through consensual non-monogamous relationships with the people that you trust, people that you deeply care for, the people that you want to learn a little bit more about. And there are many types of consensual non-monogamous relationships. Some have open relationship styles, some have more closed, some will have non-hierarchical relationship tiers. Some will have a primary partner and then a secondary partner. I cannot speak clearly today. Some relationship styles will be only about sex, and that's all they'll want from their additional partners. Or some will be all about love, and they'll have basically a second boyfriend or a second girlfriend that they care just as deeply for. And also, the communication style can range from being 100% transparent with all partners or all people engaging in the consensual non-monogamous relationships, or it can have tiers of privacy and disclosure depending on the if you have like I would say if you are engaging in the primary and secondary relationship style, your primary partner will probably have more access to your personal life and details versus the secondary partner. So that just kind of like gives an idea of how it works on a very general, broad scale.
Yeah. And I mean, there are so many types of non-monogamy, but I think the important part is consensual non-monogamy, where both parties are having these conversations and are aware. And like you said, either it's kind of 100% transparent as to who their other partners are, or more of like that don't ask, don't tell philosophy, but at least they both are on the same page and that this is what we're practicing together. Like we both know that these are the actions that we're both taking. Because honestly, cheating counts as non-monogamy. It's
Right.
not consensual non-monogamy, but it is non-monogamy. And as Ida said, it involves deceit and dishonesty and lying. And I mean, it is quite difficult sometimes to even define because it's such a wide range of behaviors that are not directly physical sex. Some people might think that you video chatting or texting a friend or someone is cheating. Some might think an emotionally intimate conversation could be cheating and some might not. So I think that's obviously a conversation that needs to take place. But another type of non-monogamy that we've kind of gotten into is also polygamy. That practice or custom of having more than one wife or husband at a time. And it's honestly the most common form of multiple partner arrangement, like in marriage polygyny, which is the marriage of one husband and multiple wives who are each sexually exclusive with that husband. But there's also polyandry, which is one woman and multiple men. So there are so many different types of non-monogamous relationships. Even the idea of having an open relationship, that umbrella term of consensually non-monogamous relationships based on kind of that primary couple, like Ida was saying, who are open to having sexual contact or sexual relationships with others. And so the most common form of open relationship is honestly that of individuals who are either married or kind of in a long-term committed relationship, and they take on a third individual to involve or a third individual to play a role in that relationship structure. And it can be open to sexual experiences, full-on relationships, but I think the biggest thing with open relationships are boundaries. They need to be clear on how you want to honor that primary person that is the long-term committed individual that you're in that relationship with, so that, like we said from the beginning, you both are on the same page.
Right. And the fourth kind of version of non-monogamy or consensual non-monogamy is swinging, or aka moonlighting. This one like threw me off. I didn't even know there was like a different name for the term swinging. But it does involve committed couples who are consensually exchanging partners, specifically for sexual purposes. And this practice of swinging actually began as wife swapping among US Air Force pilots after World War II, which is crazy to think about, that it was just like a kind of like in some way a cultural practice amongst like US Air Force pilots.
Yeah.
But it eventually spread across the globe and it became quite popular on the internet. So generally heterosexual focused subculture, but it's not limited to heterosexual like couples at all. But it is for people who want to engage in traditional relationships, but also desire the extracurricular hobbies or engaging in sex play with others. And so people kind of get enticed by those new sexual experiences, and they learn to compartmentalize their sex life and their emotional attachments to their primary partners. And another kind of, I guess, less inclusive form of swinging is being monogamish. And so I know it's kind of like, oh, monogamish. That's gonna be like another TV series or something. But it's generally a couple that is primarily monogamous, but they allow varying degrees of sexual contact with different couples or even friends. And sometimes they would allow maybe a one night stand, but maybe not a second time with the same person. It just depends on the people who are making the agreement with one another.
Mhm.
And specifically, they determine within the relationship what types of sexual activity is appropriate. You can maybe only text and flirt. Maybe you can kiss and grope other people outside of our marriage, but no intercourse. Others have time or location limitations. So maybe there's no more than a week that you can spend with somebody else, or you're only allowed to kind of like meet people when you're traveling and not at home or not in town. So your partner may not have eyes only for you, but you do not have eyes only for your partner. And you can't really engage sexually with others outside of that relationship beyond the agreement that you have with your partner. And the kind of like extension of swinging and being monogamish at the other end of the spectrum is full on polyamory. And it's a relationship style that allows people to openly conduct multiple sexual romantic relationships simultaneously. And ideally, it's with the knowledge and consent of all involved people so that it's still transparent, it's still honest. Um, Polyfidelity is also similar, except that it is a closed relationship style that requires sexual and emotional fidelity to an intimate group that is larger than two. There's also polyaffective, which is like my mind is blown right now. So there's polyamory, polyfidelity, and polyaffective. And polyaffective relationships are emotionally intimate, non-sexual connections among people connected by polyamorous relationships, such as two heterosexual men who are both in a sexual relationship with the same woman and have co-spousal or brother-like relationships with each other. There is a tribe somewhere in India where this is the case. It will be like two men who basically have one wife, and they have to kind of like live together and help, bring up the house together. But it's also a diminishing tribe and culture. There's a lot of men who run away and escape to like the major cities of India. I have to look it up and find it, but it exists already in other countries and cultures. But all in all, with polyamory, informed consent is a must.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between cheating and polyamory, y'all. So
Yeah. No, and I mean, there are so many types of non-monogamous relationships, and I know like we've already stated so many, but that's why I think it's important to have these conversations and allow yourself to know that there's expansion outside of monogamy, like even the idea or the concept of relationship anarchy. And this is my favorite kind of non-monogamous style, because it essentially eliminates specific distinctions between, or hierarchical valuations of friendships versus love-based relationships. And so essentially each relationship is unique and can evolve as participants require, but the goal is that there's no more value on a love-based relationship than a platonic friendship. And I think that's so beautiful. Like everyone is just on the same tier. Like there's no like, okay, I love you more or I love you less. It seems very, I don't know, copacetic and nice. And honestly, I mean, if conflict arises, people deal with the issues or the relationship comes to an end. I feel like that's such a good way to be like, oh, we either solve
it doesn't work out sometimes,
or nice knowing you. Thank you so much for playing. So I love that idea. But there's also, and this is so funny, there's also this idea of like a serial non-committed dater. You love the idea of what relationships can give, but not necessarily the accountability that comes with the relationship. So you do prioritize relationships in a meaningful way, just not in the traditional ways of relationships. So.
I felt like this was the one that I got matched to when there was a quiz, and we'll link it in the description of the podcast episode if anybody's interested in taking it. There's a quiz to find out what your commitment style is. And then after taking the quiz, got serial non-committed dater. Yep. And I felt kind of attacked and hurt because I felt like the definition kind of made me think of a fuckboy, and I don't feel that way. But it's also me, like, as I was like processing and trying to kind of like see like okay, how can I look at this without judgment? I can definitely see a lot of younger people falling into this category, especially if you're kind of like before the stages of even like dating seriously or having all your shit together, people who are still in college, just because the idea of a relationship can be so overbearing, and it's a lot of commitment. But if you're like in school or trying to like build your career, working on your mental health and your fitness and all these other things, but you obviously as a human you still want human connection, you end up in this serial non-committed dater limbo. And so I want to know how many other people like end up taking the quiz and like
And getting
what.
it.
Yes, because
Yeah.
I really feel like it's probably more common than we think.
I mean, I got it too. I like at first off, that quiz, just I'm not good at taking things that like force you to self-reflect, because
Mhm.
I'm more so like, well, it's situation based. Because some of the questions like,
Mm.
well, when you see your partner kiss someone else, how does that make you feel? And I'm like, well, was this an agreed about thing? Who are they kissing? Like, and there were just so
Right.
many questions that I wanted to ask, and I was like, well, this is not fair.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, no, I got serial non-committed dater too, and at first I was like, what? And then I was like, after reading the description, makes
It
sense.
is what it is.
Because I
Yeah.
think there's something to be said about wanting that form of intimacy and connection that is beyond a friendship. But there's also a very real, and I'm just going to speak from my own experience because I don't know the reasoning as to why other people fall into this category, but there's also a very real fear of losing the independence that you've become accustomed to that comes with being in a relationship, you know? And I think Whoopi Goldberg said it best. She was like, I don't want nobody in my house. And I feel that in my heart. It's like, I want to be loved and, you know, have these, and formulate these intimate relationships. Absolutely. But it's also like, there's a genuine independence that I've grown accustomed to having. And when you get into a relationship that that involves accountability and commitment and all of these things, it's not to say that both parties are no longer independent. That's not what I'm saying. You can both be independent and in a relationship. But I think that also goes to like you both being extremely strong and clear communicators. And I don't even know if I have the communication skills yet to have a successful relationship where both can remain.
There's a lot of people who don't have those skills but jump into relationships and who can't admit that they're not ready to kind of fully give themselves in the most healthy way. Or and then I mean it's also like there are people who do know this about themselves and are being very careful about stepping into something serious, which is why they end up in that category too.
Yeah, and I mean,
so
I prioritize, like it says in the definition, you know, you prioritize relationships in meaningful ways. Absolutely, I do. But I think in the traditional ways that people want, like the call me all the time and check in and this, is I'm just not quite there yet in terms of my communication skills to be able to articulate and verbalize my boundaries, because as we learned last episode, I'm still learning what they are. And so I'm taking the necessary time before I get into another relationship to kind of be like, wait, what are my needs, wants, and what are the boundaries that I need to be upfront about as soon as I get into a relationship. So while serial non-committed dater can have kind of a negative connotation, I think it also doesn't necessarily need to equate to a fuckboy. It's just someone who does value relationships. But if you're great at communicating and you can tell someone right off the bat, look, these are the things that I'm able to deal with. These are the things that are kind of crossing the line and I'm not quite there yet. And you both are okay with that concept. That's great. Fuckboys, when one person
thank you.
Know that that's the concept that they.
Thank you for making that clarification.
You know what I mean? Like,
because I was in my feelings. I was like,
yeah, exactly. Because when I first got it, I was like, huh? And I was like, oh, it makes sense. Because I think a fuckboy, and this is a conversation for another day, but I think what makes a fuckboy is that they may be a serial non-committed dater. They just not communicate that to the person they're dating. You know what I mean? So I think that's where the animosity and the upsetness and all of those negative emotions comes from. Because one person may be a serial non-committed dater, they're just not telling the other person, look, I'm not really trying to, you know, be accountable or be held to certain standards.
Yeah.
So, but
that's real.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And there, like we said, there's even free relationships with this concept of like down to figure things out with your partner. You're not really committing to any relationship structure. You're just committed to figuring out what works best for the people involved at any given time. I love these like very open-ended
Like flexible kind
concepts
of
when it
ones. Yeah.
exactly because it just makes you think like,
There's
wow, the
room to
amount of
grow.
relationships. Exactly. Like I feel like we've put ourselves in a box of like monogamy is it, everything else is like taboo or weird or wrong. And that's not the case at all, because a lot of what these relationship structures or these non-monogamous relationship structures allow us to have is freedom, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is what leads people, or lack thereof is what leads people to, aka Derek Jackson, be with other people and be lying or cheating on your spouse when you feel
Right.
confined to a certain structure that you might not necessarily fit into or agree with. It's not
Yeah.
to say you can have one partner who wants one thing and another partner who wants another thing. All of this boils down to open and honest communication and
Mm-hmm.
trust.
And it's definitely like I'll just like add that I know it can be way more complicated when you add kids to the mix and how you
Oh,
want to
absolutely.
kind of grow or expand out of your traditional relationship if you are practicing monogamy. Um, it's a challenge to kind of get out of that if you have a responsibility to children, but I don't think it is
It's possible.
impossible. Yeah,
Do you
like
know what I mean?
yeah, like there just has to be, I think, transparency and communication. Like I think you can be honest with your partner and say, I am at a point where I want to try new things, explore new people, even though I still love you, I still love our family. I don't want to be deceitful and cheat, Derek Jackson, but I do want to explore my sexuality more or date other people, but still
Mhm.
have some level of commitment and accountability to you as like the father or mother of my children or whatever. I I don't know how those conversations would go if people attempted to have them, but I would imagine that it'd be better than just straight up like
Doing things
lying.
behind people's back. And I think
Yeah.
it requires open minded. Like, I'm not saying relationships all can be solved by communication, because while you can communicate, like we said, your wants, needs, desires, you wanting to explore new things, new experiences, new people, if the individual that you're communicating with isn't ready to hear that or receive that, or
Mhm.
doesn't maybe share the same open mindedness, there will be conflict. This is not, none
Yeah.
of these relationship structures are devoid of conflict and all of these
Right.
normal emotions that come with being in a relationship. But I think what these relationship structures do allow for individuals who are both open-minded or more than two people, that's what
Mhm.
a lot of these structures include and allow for, is that everyone is open-minded enough to at least allow the person that they're in the relationship with to explore, to be heard, to see where they're coming from. And
Mhm.
that, I don't think, is a skill that a lot of people have down pat yet. Like
Mhm.
being open, like, because even if somebody came up to you and was like, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking about, it's one thing to be like, thank you so much for entrusting me with this information. It's a
Mhm.
completely other thing to be like, now go act on it.
Right.
Like, so this is not just I tell my partner this one day and the next day they're like, yeah, man, treat yourself,
Yeah.
whatever you
You
want to do.
still will face
This is a
rejection.
process.
Yeah. And it's also kind of like you have to ask yourself too, where does the desire for wanting multiple partnerships come from? Is it
Mhm.
like now we're kind of like just moving into like our point of view, which
Yeah.
I could save for later, but I'll just say very quickly that there's a difference from acting out of spite or acting out of the desire for instant gratification versus feeling a void that maybe in your relationship there's an emotional connection missing, or maybe that one partner might have a higher sex drive than another. I think you can try to kind of find the source of why you're exploring outside of the relationship before acting on it to figure out what is the best way to move forward. Because for some people, people who cheat, there's a lot of people who cheat and they regret it, and they feel horrible about it. But it was kind of a short, I don't
Term
know.
gratification.
Yes, thank you. A
Like, it wasn't like
short-term
I
solution to a
want
problem that didn't
to.
need that.
Yeah, it wasn't like I'm trying to pursue other relationship structures and I feel trapped and confined. And, it was more so I'm not getting something from my current partner. Let me
Hmm.
go to someone else or whatever to try to get it from them.
Right.
So,
So that's kind of my 2 cents before we really get into our POV section. But yeah, outside of like all of those other types of non-monogamous relationships, there's modern monogamy. Everyone believes commitment, fidelity. Everyone's going for the long haul, but they also believe in leaving relationships that aren't serving them. And so it is the most popular structure. And then there's asexuality. It does not have a lot of someone who does not have a lot of drive to sexually or romantically connect with others would fall into the category of asexuality. And that's 100% fine. Like there's some people who just find joy in friendships. And it's a spectrum. There's some people who can be asexual but they're not aromantic. Maybe they enjoy maybe they do enjoy being romantic with other partners, flirtatious, but like it's limited to that and it doesn't go beyond anything um emotional, I guess.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and there are also like polyamory subsets outside of just non-monogamy. There's kitchen table poly, parachuting, guard railing, parallel poly, metamor, polysaturated. We're not gonna dive into all of those, but if you're interested, definitely do some research on the polyamory subsets because there's way more options for people to kind of explore and choose from.
Yeah. And I mean, like we said, this idea, while it allows for all of this freedom and open mindedness and for people to be kind of their full, authentic extension of themselves sexually and relationship wise, it still seems so radical because mononormativity is ingrained in us, and that kind of any other alternative seems so far out of reach that it's just not a viable option because of the stigmatization that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas about 4 to 5% of Americans are already choosing to live this non monogamous lifestyle. And researchers even found that as more people align with non monogamy, there'll be kind of like a less discrimination. And while that doesn't necessarily, people are reported higher rates of satisfaction with their relationship and all of these other beautiful things that can come out of having this very open styles of relationships. And I don't know, I just like the fact that it's not so limiting. Like I feel like when you're limited, you tend to get in things that you probably wouldn't agree with had you known there were other options and alternatives.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know like some things that like people bring up regarding their concern for moving out of a monogamy commitment style would be children, like we were mentioning. With divorce rates being so high in the United States, up to 50% of marriages end in divorce in our country. Most children, to be honest, are already accustomed to living in families where they have multiple adult figures in their life. So if it's your concern of like, well, how are you going to raise kids if you have more than one father, more than one mother? Step parents are already a common phenomenon. Children already have grown up in society where they have multiple adult figures, and it's not something that is like kind of like weird or foreign. I think it's kind of the value that we as adults attach to it and teach children to feel about it kind of like makes it more stigmatized than what it should be. But the difference though between a step parent relationship and a relationship that a metamor partner or polyamorous partner of your parent would be is the step parents end up kind of being resented by parents. Not always. There are step parents who do have good relationships with the family that the children of the family they're kind of like joining into, but it is kind of the general, I guess, stereotype that like step parents don't always have the best or closest relationship with their stepchildren. And to be honest, children benefit from having multiple healthy adult figures living with them. It does not hurt to have more than one caretaker in the home. So going back to like a more tribal or communal way of raising a family, it's kind of what our ancestors did. Like a village, raised a child. It was not uncommon. And the economic burden of, and not that children are burdens, but it costs money and it takes time. When you have multiple adults, the finances and the time gets spread amongst those adults. And so it can actually work in your benefit if that is a commitment style or a relationship style that you are more open to.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing that people always bring up is like, well, if people are in this relationship structure and people are doing non-monogamous relationships, what about jealousy? Like when everyone gets so jealous of each other and the prioritization of others. And to be honest, jealousy is still common in non-monogamous relationships the same way jealousy is common in monogamous relationships. Like jealousy is an emotion is normalized in any relationship structure. Jealousy is something that happens amongst family members, amongst friends. Like this is not a new only monogamy relationships feel this for, So, and while often, yes, it is overwhelming, understanding that expectations may be unmet is essentially what the cause of jealousy is. So like in understanding that can help you respond to it more productively, because a lot of times jealousy is a sign that there may be an imbalance in what you and your partner expect from each other and need from each other. And it involves a lot of self-awareness and internal work to deal with the jealousy. And you have to realize that just because you give someone the option to have other partners does not mean that they will leave you. I think there's a real concern that like, oh, if I get into a non-monogamous relationship, then like what if they find someone else and they fall in love with them and they leave? And I'm not saying that that's definitely not a possibility, but I think that there's an understanding that like everyone has a part to play. And I don't think we've talked about this yet, but it's kind of hard to assume that your needs and expectations, 100% of them will be met by one person. And I'm not saying that faithful monogamous relationships can't last, because they can, because you both have to compromise in certain aspects, But I think that by having non-monogamy kind of be a relationship structure that we slowly start to incorporate, we'll start to see that, you can have multiple friends. Why can't you have multiple partners?
Right.
You don't love one friend more than another, or each friend that you have in your life provides something to you that you find meaningful, that you would want to keep them around. And friends that you no longer find meaningful or no longer serve you, you don't. And there's the same thing with people. The people who you find in non-monogamous relationship structures, my assumption is that the people that you find, you can get something meaningful from each of them. And when they are no longer serving you, the same way a relationship would end when that person is no longer serving you, they leave. But they won't just leave you just because. There's always a reason behind that, I would think. But essentially the point is, look, in non-monogamy, you're not forced to be in a relationship because of a marriage contract. There's that freedom. But you are choosing to be in a relationship with this person every single day. It's a choice, not a contract.
Yeah. So, in conclusion, generally, my personal perspective, I feel both monogamy and non-monogamy are great options as long as those options are working for you and your relationships. For me, it's still really new. It's not, I have never practiced this, but I can understand and see the benefits to kind of exploring and understanding how it can fit into your lifestyle. So yeah, I think it makes sense, but through open and constant communication.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think open and honest communication is really at the crux of a successful monogamous or consensual non-monogamous relationship, and people need to be on the same page. but I also think, like Ida, this is a relatively new concept to me. And while I like it and I'm drawn to a lot of the beneficial aspects of it, I do need to sit with it because I would consider myself to kind of be like a jealous lover. You know what I mean?
It's
So
not like you're like, oh yeah, I'm down. You can go sleep with whoever you want.
And then like as soon as somebody brings up the topic, I can't in good like in good faith, I can't be like, yeah, I'd be totally cool with that. So I kind of imagine myself to be someone who might be a little hesitant. So I just haven't, you know, obviously I haven't been in a defined relationship in a minute. So I don't really know what my beliefs are anymore in that realm, but I've really only been in like situationships, and the rules about commitment and what you can and can't do are extremely blurred in those. So
constant communication.
I mean, look,
even in monogamy, people make assumptions about what monogamy is supposed to look like. Everyone practices it differently within their relationship. And I think like even if we don't even know, like we have limited knowledge, like, you know, we're still in our 20s. There are people who have been in a relationship for 30, 40 years. We don't know how they chose to make that work for that long. But we can only assume that it was a system that they figured out that worked for them. And that's all really you can kind of like ask of others and of yourself when making an attempt to kind of build a relationship with one another. So,
and I think that also speaks to, because, you know, in doing the research for this podcast, we saw so many different types of couples, you know, couples who were like, oh, we were high school sweethearts, and then couples who were in arranged marriages that their parents kind of put them into, and both successful, going on 46 years. So there's also something to be said about, like we said, compromise and like learning to love someone and learning to grow in that relationship. And I don't know, it's a complex category, it's a complex topic, but I do agree. I will say this, like, this is my closing argument. I agree that at the end of the day, regardless of whether you're in a monogamous or non-monogamous relationship, when there is deception, lying, dishonesty, that is cheating. Like whether you're in a relationship with one other individual or you're practicing a relationship structure with multiple individuals, anytime you are doing something that the other people in that relationship do not know about, or you are lying about it, that to me is cheating regardless. Right. So something is wrong. You are doing
people need to know that like it doesn't replace the act of lying and deceitfulness just because you and your partner agree to have an open relationship or practice polyamory. Like Deja is saying, there needs to be constant and clear communication of how you're going to engage with an additional partner, or even if it's just kind of like a one-night stand or a fling. Like if that is something that you and your partner both consent to, and it's something you both want to explore, communicate it, talk about it, and express it before you act on it. And you can kind of maybe find something in the middle that works for everybody. So yeah, if anyone is interested in taking the quiz that we took to find out our commitment styles, you can go to www.thegameofdesire.com/commitment. And it's pretty cool. It has like a bunch of these like questions that will kind of help you figure out what your ideal relationship structure looks like, or at least help you kind of understand what your current like relationship structure looks like, even if it's not the ideal one that you're trying to pursue.
Honestly, I think it'd be interesting to take it with your partner just to see where you both stand, you know, and what you're
take it in like different rooms so you don't influence each other.
Like separately, but then come together and kind of see, because even in the video there were people who were in relationships who had different preferred relationship structures. Like this woman, sugars, I forget what her relationship structure is, but she was
open, and her partner was traditional monogamous.
Yes. So it can work as long as you guys, like we said, you know, are willing to compromise and have those conversations and kind of discuss your needs and wants. And that's not to say that they will always be met. You know, and that's
Mhm.
also not to say that one person should always be the person compromising. I don't know anything really about marriage, but I do know that like compromise, it takes two or maybe three or four. I don't know how many people you want to be in a relationship with,
Right.
but both people need to equally be working at it.
Exactly. But thank you guys for tuning in and helping us dissect the concept of monogamous relationships with us tonight. If you have any topics that you want us to tackle or you want to be on an episode of Sad Girl Sunday, send us a DM on our Instagram page. And we want to allow people to share their stories and their truth if possible.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, as always, you guys know that you can listen to this episode and more on Spotify, Anchor, and Apple Podcasts, and so many other. There are so many other podcast platforms, like too many to name. I know there's Google Podcasts.
RSS, I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, we're out there. We are out there. So definitely, please check us out, and don't forget
We're
to
on
follow
YouTube too.
Exactly. So there's no excuse.
Yeah.
But don't forget to follow us on Instagram at sadgirlsunday_. And I will spell that out for you lovely people at SADGRLSUNDAY_.
Have a great night.
Bye, guys.